I asked God about you, not in a temple, not in some perfect, quiet moment where everything made sense. I asked in the middle of confusion, in the middle of noise, in the middle of a world that moves too fast and feels too artificial. I said, why them? Out of billions of people, why did our paths cross? And the answer I felt wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't shake the sky or stop time. We often assume that when someone enters our life, they're meant to stay. We build expectations almost instantly, imagining a future, assigning roles, creating a sense of permanence that feels comforting and safe. But reality doesn't always follow that script. Some people arrive with intensity, with meaning, with connection that feels undeniable, yet their presence is temporary. And that doesn't make the connection any less real or valuable. It's difficult to accept this because we naturally associate value with duration. The longer someone stays, the more we believe they matter. But that way of thinking overlooks something important. Impact is not measured in time. A person can change your perspective, shift your direction, or awaken something within you in a very short period. They can say one sentence, make one decision, or simply exist in your life at the right moment, and that alone can alter your path in ways that last far longer than their presence ever did. When we hold too tightly to the idea that people must stay, we start trying to control things that aren't meant to be controlled. We ignore signs, we force continuity, and we resist change because we've already decided what the outcome should look like. This creates unnecessary tension. Instead of experiencing the connection for what it is, we become focused on preserving it, even when it naturally begins to fade or shift. There's also a deeper layer to this. Some people are not aligned with who you will become. They are aligned with who you are in a specific moment. As you grow, your mindset evolves, your priorities change, and your direction becomes clearer. Not everyone is meant to make that entire journey with you. Their role might have been to meet you at a certain stage, contribute something essential, and then step away as you move forward. That doesn't mean the connection failed. It means it served its purpose. The challenge is learning to recognize that purpose without attaching it to permanence. It requires a different perspective, one where you evaluate connections based on what they bring into your life, not how long they last. This shift allows you to appreciate people without needing to hold on to them indefinitely. It creates space for gratitude instead of resistance. There's also a kind of precision in how these interactions happen. Timing plays a critical role. Meeting someone too early or too late might make the same connection meaningless. But when it happens, at the exact moment you need it, even a brief interaction can feel significant. That timing isn't something you can always predict or control, but you can choose how aware you are of it. Letting go of the expectation that everyone must stay doesn't make relationships less meaningful. It actually makes them more honest. You stop trying to turn every connection into something permanent and instead allow it to be exactly what it is. Some people will stay, and their presence will grow with you. Others will leave, and their absence will still carry meaning. Understanding this changes how you experience relationships. You become less focused on holding on and more focused on learning, observing, and evolving. And in doing that, you stop seeing temporary as something negative. You start seeing it as something intentional. It's easy to measure relationships by their stability, how long they last, how consistent they feel, how secure they make you. That kind of thinking feels natural because certainty is comfortable. But when you focus only on holding on to people, you can miss the deeper value of what they're actually bringing into your life. The more useful question isn't how to keep someone, but what their presence is shaping inside you. Growth doesn't always feel good. In fact, most of the time it doesn't. It shows up as discomfort, as confusion, as moments where your old way of thinking no longer works, but a new one hasn't fully formed yet. When someone enters your life and triggers that kind of internal shift, your instinct might be to stabilize the situation, to preserve the connection so you don't lose the feeling or the person causing it. But that instinct can pull your attention away from the real opportunity, which is the transformation happening within you. If you shift your focus from attachment to growth, everything changes. Instead of asking, "How do I make this last?" you begin asking, "What is this teaching me?" That question is far more powerful because it puts you back in control of your own development. It removes the dependency on another person for your sense of progress and redirects it towards something you can actually build and sustain. People who impact your growth often do so by challenging you. They might expose weaknesses you didn't want to face or reflect behaviors you've been ignoring. They might push you to think differently, act differently, or question assumptions you've held for a long time. None of that is easy. It can feel unsettling, even threatening, because it disrupts your sense of identity, but that disruption is often where the most meaningful progress begins. When you prioritize growth, you also become more adaptable. You stop trying to force situations to match your expectations and start responding to them as they are. This doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you care in a way that doesn't limit your own evolution. You allow connections to exist without demanding that they define your future. there's also a level of clarity that comes with this mindset. You begin to notice patterns, how certain types of people bring out specific reactions in you, how repeated experiences point to areas that need attention. Instead of blaming circumstances or focusing on external outcomes, you start analyzing your internal responses. That awareness gives you leverage. It allows you to make intentional changes rather than reactive ones. Another important aspect is that growth is cumulative. What you learn from one person doesn't disappear when they're no longer around. It becomes part of how you think, how you decide, how you interact with others in the future. In that sense, focusing on growth creates something lasting, even when the connection itself is temporary. This approach also reduces fear. When your priority is attachment, loss becomes something you constantly try to avoid. But when your priority is growth, even endings have value. They become part of the process rather than something that invalidates it. You start to see that nothing meaningful is wasted because every experience contributes to who you are becoming. Over time, this mindset builds a stronger sense of independence. You're no longer relying on external stability to feel grounded. Instead, you're developing an internal framework that allows you to navigate change more effectively. You become less concerned with controlling outcomes and more focused on understanding them. And in that shift, relationships take on a different role. They're no longer something you cling to in order to feel complete. They become part of a larger system of learning and progression. You engage with people not just to maintain connection, but to evolve through it. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to walk beside you in a steady, predictable way. Some people don't come in to support your comfort or to create a sense of stability. Instead, they arrive to disrupt something. They challenge your thinking, shake your assumptions, and push you into situations you didn't plan for. At first, this can feel like a problem. You might see them as difficult, confusing, or even unnecessary, but if you look more closely, their role is very different from what you initially expected. These individuals act more like catalysts than companions. A companion moves with you, aligning with your pace and direction. A catalyst, on the other hand, creates a reaction. They accelerate change. They bring things to the surface that would have stayed hidden if everything had remained comfortable. And that reaction, while sometimes uncomfortable, is often exactly what you need to move forward. It's important to understand that catalysts don't always come in a positive or easy form. They might challenge your beliefs in ways that feel confrontational. They might reflect parts of yourself you don't like or haven't fully acknowledged. They might create situations that force you to make decisions you've been avoiding. Because of this, your instinct might be to resist them, to push them away, or to label the experience as negative. But that reaction can prevent you from seeing the value in what's happening. When someone acts as a catalyst in your life, they're not necessarily there to build something stable with you. They're there to initiate movement. They might spark ambition, reveal emotional patterns, or highlight gaps in your thinking. They might make you realize what you truly want, or what you definitely don't want. And once that realization happens, their role is often complete. This can be difficult to accept because we tend to measure relationships by continuity. We expect that meaningful connections should last, and when they don't, we assume something went wrong. But with catalysts, the impact is not tied to duration. Their purpose is fulfilled through the change they create, not through how long they remain in your life. There's also a level of precision in how these interactions unfold. A catalyst often appears at a moment when you're ready, whether you realize it or not, to face something new. Without that timing, the same interaction might not have the same effect. It's not just about who they are, but when they appear and what's happening in your life at that point. Recognizing someone as a catalyst requires a shift in perspective. Instead of focusing on how they fit into your life long term, you start paying attention to what they're activating within you. Are they pushing you to think bigger? Are they exposing fears you've been ignoring? Are they forcing you to adapt in ways you hadn't considered? These questions help you move from resistance to understanding. At the same time, it's important not to confuse intensity with compatibility. Just because someone creates a strong reaction doesn't mean they're meant to stay or that the connection should be maintained indefinitely. The purpose of a catalyst is to create change, not necessarily to provide ongoing support. Holding on to them beyond that purpose can lead to frustration because you're trying to turn a moment of transformation into a permanent structure. When you begin to see people in this way, you become more aware of the different roles individuals play in your life. Some will offer stability and consistency. Others will bring disruption and growth. Both are valuable, but they serve different functions. Understanding that distinction allows you to engage with each connection more effectively without forcing it into a role it was never meant to fulfill. Over time, this awareness helps you navigate relationships with greater clarity. You stop expecting every person to be everything. Instead, you recognize the specific impact they're having and respond accordingly, and in doing so, you make better use of the changes they initiate rather than resisting them or misunderstanding their purpose. Most people try to avoid discomfort. It's almost automatic. When something feels uncertain, emotionally intense, or unstable, the instinct is to step back, fix it quickly, or return to something familiar. Comfort feels safe, predictable, controlled, But growth doesn't operate in that space. It rarely shows up in situations where everything already makes sense. Instead, it emerges when something disrupts your normal way of thinking and forces you to confront what you don't fully understand. Discomfort is often the first signal that something is shifting. It's not random. It usually appears when your current mindset is no longer enough for where you're going. That tension you feel, whether it's confusion, frustration, or even emotional overload, is a sign that your perspective is being challenged. And that challenge is necessary because without it, there's no reason to change. The problem is that discomfort can feel like something is wrong. It can create the impression that a situation is failing or that you've made a mistake. But that interpretation isn't always accurate. Sometimes what feels like chaos is actually a restructuring process. Old patterns are being questioned, assumptions are being broken down, and new ways of thinking are trying to form. It's not clean or linear, it's messy, unpredictable, and often unclear. But that doesn't make it negative. Think about how your understanding evolves over time. At one point, certain beliefs or habits felt completely right. They worked, they made sense, and they defined how you operated. Then something happened. A new experience, a new person, a new challenge, and suddenly those same beliefs didn't hold up the way they used to. That moment of realization is rarely comfortable. It creates a gap between what you used to know and what you're starting to see. That gap is where discomfort lives. Instead of trying to eliminate that feeling, it can be more useful to analyze it. What exactly is being challenged? Why does this situation feel unstable? What assumptions are no longer working? These questions turn discomfort into something productive. They shift your focus from reacting emotionally to understanding the underlying change that's taking place. There's also an important distinction between harmful situations and growth-related discomfort. Not all discomfort is useful, and it's important to recognize the difference. But when the discomfort comes from being challenged, from learning, from adapting to something new, it often carries value. It indicates that you're moving beyond your current limits, even if you don't yet know what comes next. Another aspect is that transformation doesn't happen all at once. It's a process that unfolds over time, and discomfort tends to appear at each stage where adjustment is required. You might feel uncertain at the beginning, resistant in the middle, and only later gain clarity about what the experience was actually doing for you. This delay can make it harder to trust the process because the benefit isn't always immediate. But that doesn't mean it isn't there. Avoiding discomfort can slow down this process. When you constantly move back to what feels safe, you limit your exposure to situations that could expand your thinking. You stay within a familiar range, which might feel stable in the short term, but prevents long-term development. On the other hand, allowing yourself to experience and work through discomfort increases your capacity to handle complexity, uncertainty, and change. Over time, your relationship with discomfort can shift. Instead of seeing it as something to escape, you begin to recognize it as information. It becomes a signal that something important is happening, even if you don't fully understand it yet. That awareness doesn't remove the difficulty, but it changes how you respond to it. Rather than reacting with avoidance, you start engaging with it more deliberately. You observe it, question it, and use it as a guide. And in doing so, you turn what initially felt like chaos into a pathway for transformation. We often describe encounters as coincidence. You meet someone unexpectedly, cross paths at the right moment, and it feels random, like something that just happened without reason. That explanation is convenient because it doesn't require deeper thought. But if you look more closely at how these moments unfold, they don't always feel entirely accidental. There's often a kind of alignment, timing, circumstances, mindset, all coming together in a way that makes the interaction meaningful. It's not necessarily about believing that every detail is pre-planned, but it's hard to ignore how certain connections seem to arrive exactly when they're needed. You might be going through a specific phase, questioning something, struggling with a decision, or trying to move forward, and then someone appears who directly or indirectly influences that process. The impact might not be obvious at first, but over time, you start to see how that interaction shaped your direction. What makes this idea powerful is the shift in awareness it creates. When you stop seeing everything as random, you begin paying more attention. You become more observant of patterns, more conscious of how different experiences connect. Instead of dismissing interactions as chance, you start asking what they might mean, what they might be pointing toward, or what they might be revealing about your current path. Timing plays a critical role in this. The same person, in a different phase of your life, might not have the same effect. If you're not ready, mentally, emotionally, or situationally, the connection might pass without significance. But when timing aligns, even a brief interaction can leave a lasting impression. It's not just about who you meet, but when you meet them and what's happening in your life at that moment. There's also a feedback loop involved. The way you think and act influences the kinds of situations you encounter. Your decisions shape your environment, Your environment shapes your interactions, and those interactions then influence your next set of decisions. When you view life through that lens, connections start to look less like isolated events and more like part of an ongoing system. Each one contributes to the direction you're moving in. This doesn't mean that every interaction carries deep meaning or that you need to overanalyze every situation. Some encounters are brief and neutral, but others stand out. They trigger thought, emotion, or change in a way that feels disproportionate to the moment itself. Those are often the ones worth paying attention to because they tend to connect to something larger. Seeing connections as potentially meaningful also changes how you engage with them. You become more present, more attentive, less distracted. Instead of moving through interactions automatically, you start noticing details, what's being said, how you're reacting, what ideas are being introduced. This level of awareness allows you to extract more value from each experience, whether the connection lasts or not. At the same time, this perspective introduces a sense of responsibility. If interactions are not entirely random, then how you respond to them matters more. Ignoring something important, dismissing a moment too quickly, or failing to reflect on what you've experienced can mean missing an opportunity for growth or understanding. It doesn't require overthinking, but it does require a certain level of attention. Over time, you may start to see how different connections link together. A conversation leads to an idea, that idea leads to a decision, that decision leads to a new environment, and in that environment, you meet someone else who continues the pattern. When viewed in isolation, each step might seem random, but when you connect them, a structure begins to appear. That structure doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it adds depth to your experience. It suggests that your path is shaped not just by deliberate choices, but also by how you interpret and respond to the connections along the way. And in that sense, what once seemed like coincidence begins to feel more like part of a larger, unfolding process.